it to be so consistent that it hurts, because at the beginning it sucks, dude. Like, you're putting in all this time, effort, energy, and work into this thing, and then like it's like seemingly nobody cares.
Jose, I know that you have awesome questions, but here, like, this analogy just came to my head. I can't remember if it was a movie, the 21. It was like a magician movie, but there's a
I thought you were about to say it was Magic Mike.
you wish,
like, what?
You wish.
It was let's talk about networking, and then use this as a way to learn how to network better myself. And then what ironically ended up happening was that the podcast itself ended up becoming like the Trojan horse for me to get me indoors and in rooms with people that I never thought I would be able to have conversations with.
Hey, I'm Luis.
And I'm Luis.
And you're listening to the Content is Profit podcast,
where we talk about entrepreneurship, mindset, and of course, how to turn your content into profit.
But most importantly, we're here to have a good time with you. So go to contentisprofit.com and join the community.
Oh yeah, and today we have an incredible guest. I'm so pumped up. Today we're also talking about kind of like a topic that we are so passionate about.
I know.
Which is building and leveraging your network through podcasting.
You deleted a word in there.
Did I?
Maybe. I don't know. I said.
No, I think you wrote it somewhere else.
Okay.
And then I just wrote it myself here.
I want to highlight that. Profitable network. Just gonna put that out there because for us that's what changed everything, and in a good way. So yeah, I'm very excited. I'm definitely very excited. So, anything else you want to add?
When I envision ourselves in like 2-3 years, I imagine myself as today's guest. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Pretty good.
With his name too. I'm gonna start calling him his name.
Maybe. Who knows? He has a better beard too. So we'll see. We'll have to check that out.
Anyways, guys, if you guys are enjoying this show, make sure to go ahead and follow it in your favorite podcasting platform and connect with us on social media at BIZBROS Go.
That is right. And if today's guest help you move one step closer towards your goal, please don't forget to share this episode with 3 friends. That is your ticket of admission.
Podcasting royalty alert. Today we have what some might consider a podcasting legend. 700 plus episodes. Top 0.05% of podcasters. Today's guest is the creme de la creme of the podcasting world.
You didn't let me down with the French accent. Appreciate it, guys. Today's guest is the host of the Build Your Network podcast. He's had conversations with people like Shaquille O'Neal, Rob Dyrdek, Grant Cardone, aka Uncle G, John Maxwell, and probably any other legendary person you've heard about.
Not just that, he recently founded the highest quality guest and show booking marketplace in the industry, Guestio.com. Wait, what's that? You want to find the best guests and podcasts to be on? Then this is your guy.
Oh man, I'm so ready. Please welcome podcasting royalty and master of networks, Travis Chappell.
What's up, guys? What's happening?
Dude, we are excited, as you can tell, that you're here today with us. So thank you so much.
Excited to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel like I got to bring up the energy a little bit.
No, man,
we're good.
Just by showing up, that's all we need. We can feel the presence and, all the knowledge that you're about to bring in here. You're going to blow people's minds. So yeah, we're excited.
Well, I feel like I have to now to just keep up with the expectations from that intro.
That's the whole plan, We set these expectations high up, and then it's like, well, okay, guess now you got to deliver, Now
you talk for 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Dude, Travis, I'm excited to learn a little bit about your story, right? Because you have an incredible platform right now. You've connected with incredible people. Your network, right, is probably worth billions, right? It's crazy. And but I'm very interested. Like, how does that journey start? Like the entrepreneurship side. Like how do you find out about connecting on the network side of things?
Yeah, it was really kind of out of necessity for me. So I grew up extremely religious. Went to kindergarten on the same campus that I went to college on. It was like 1 40-acre campus. So I tell people I grew up like in a bubble because, from the time that I was like 4 until the time that I was 21, 22, it was pretty much 7 days a week on this one campus because that's where I went to church. That's where I went to school. Our youth group activities, our like basketball, everything was there, And it was kind of this mega church campus, like 6,000 members of the church. There was a 800 student college on the campus and a 400 student K through 12 on the campus. And I went from kindergarten all the way through senior year of college at those schools.
Wow.
So when I was getting ready to graduate college, I had a degree. I was getting my degree, double major in Bible and church ministries. And by the time I graduated, I realized I didn't want to do that with my career. And I got to that point when I was graduating. So here I am with a useless Bible degree because it would have been useless already, but it happened to be unaccredited. So it was an unaccredited Bible degree, which doesn't really, make employers line up at your front door when you're graduating college.
Yeah.
And I had grown up kind of in a real estate household. My dad was an agent, and I wanted to buy a house. And so, like, right after graduated college, I bought a house. And right before I graduated college, I got married to my high school sweetheart. So now I'm 21, I have a mortgage to pay, and I have a wife, and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do at the time, which was door-to-door sales. Mm-hmm. And that was what I did in college to make a little bit extra cash. And I figure, hey, if I did this full time, I'd be able to actually make some real money doing it. And so I set the goal at 6 figures and started knocking doors. In my first year, full time door-to-door sales, made 6 figures knocking doors, selling alarm systems when I was like 22, 23. And when that happened, something kind of counterintuitive happened at the end of the year. Like most 22-year-olds, you make 6 figures in 20-hour, 25-hour work weeks. You're like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this for a while. Yeah. For me, when I got to the end of the year, it was like, I feel like I'm pretty close to the ceiling of what I can do here. And that was super scary for me at being 22. And I knew that if I fast forwarded the clock to 32-year-old Travis, I knew that I didn't want to be still knocking doors. And so now at that point, I have a degree that's useless, and I have a skill set that I don't want to use anymore. And now I'm just back to square one. And at that point, it was just kind of like a back against the wall moment where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I had a mortgage and bills and a wife, and I couldn't just go sleep on my mom's couch until I figured it out. So I took some time off. My wife was working at the time. Luckily, we cashed in on a real estate deal. I took some time off and just basically got my physical health back in shape because I kind of let it go when I was doing door-to-door. And just focused in on personal development, which was the first time I'd ever really done anything like that. I started actually reading some books, listening to some audiobooks. First time in my life came across podcasts and started being just an avid consumer of podcasts. And I would just always have it in my ears, walking around the house, whatever I was doing dishes, mowing the lawn, whatever it was, I had a podcast in. And eventually just got to the point where I was like, yeah, I think this might be kind of like a cool way to potentially make some money and try to figure out, what I'm going to do. Yeah. And so started the show, did not go well for a while, and then kept with it, persistent enough. It started going pretty well. And then that's when people started asking me how I did it and started asking me for help with their podcasts. So I just leaned into that a little bit more, started doing podcast coaching and consulting. Then when my client list got too full, we took all the trainings that we took with private clients and we turned it into a course, started selling course and community type stuff, masterminds, things like that. 2020 happened and it shut down our entire events and mastermind side of the business. And so we at that point decided, let's go ahead and build this software company out because I had the idea for a couple of months and figured, hey, if there's ever a time to do it, it's right now. So we started development in June of 2020. We launched at the end of the year. All of 2021 was just kind of like trial and error after we closed a seed round of about 1.3 million in August of 21. And then really figured out, kind of found that like product market fit towards the end of 2021, really beginning of 2022, and then decided to go ahead and build an agency on the back end of the software to do a little bit of done for you of what the software does DIY. And so that kind of brings us up to today. So now we have a 7-figure agency and software company. And then my Build Your Network podcast is coming up on 800 episodes. And you guys mentioned some of the guests that we've had on there, over 2-point-something million downloads on that show. And then we started a new show, Figuring It Out, which we launched last month and got over 60,000 downloads month one on that show. So just trying to crank stuff out and keep making progress.
Amazing. We can just end the episode right now. You just gave us a whole roadmap of how to build a fun and incredible business. Thanks for sharing, man. I know Fonzie has some comments. There's something that will come up in the show, by the way. It's called Choke the Mic. So whenever Fonzie doesn't let anybody talk, that's Choke the Mic session. But there was something that you mentioned. Obviously, there's a period there where you said, I launched the show and it wasn't doing so well, and then it did so well. What is the difference between those two for you? I'll share what it was for us, but I'm very interested in your point of view. Like, what's what's a show that does well? What's a show that doesn't do well?
Time, consistency, and time. For me, it was just that. It was just like I launched it expecting for it to take off in 3 months, and it took me probably a year and a half to get it to where it finally started like bringing in like real download numbers. You know, like 2, 3, 4, 5,000 downloads an episode. Like it finally started kind of picking up a little bit after just being painful. I tell people like you got to be painfully consistent.
Yeah,
you have to be so consistent that it hurts, because at the beginning it sucks, dude. Like you're putting in all this time, effort, energy, and work into this thing, and then like it's like seemingly nobody cares. Like nobody's listening. You're putting all this work and energy into something, and then you launch, and then it's crickets, and it feels like, well, why am I even doing this? This seems like just a massive waste of my time. But painfully consistent, man. You just stick in it. If you're in it for the long haul, you're in it for the long haul, and it doesn't matter how long it took me. I knew that I was gonna do it until it worked.
Yeah. What kept you going? Because obviously we see the after of that situation, right? You know, we're for us, we're in a transition mode right now where it was independent show to now we're part of the Hotspot Podcast Network, and that has been an incredible journey on its own, right? And now we have access to resources, we have access to a community, we have access to many things, right, that we didn't have before. So we feel like right now is a turning point for the show itself. Is like part 2 evolution, right? But now we've seen your after and what you built, right, based on that initial platform that you have. What kept you going at that time? Do you have any idea what was the plan?
I just believed in the long term. You know, I saw the people that were living the life that I wanted to live, and the goal was more important to me than the short-term pain. Like the long-term accomplishing of what I was set out to achieve was more important to me than like the short-term pain that I was feeling on the journey to getting to that point. So I always tell people like that fear of regret is a bigger motivator for me than fear of failure. And for most people, I think fear of failure is the bigger motivator. And that's the difference between short-term thinkers and long-term thinkers. Yeah. If you're a short-term thinker, you probably fear failure more than you fear regret, which is why you don't take big risks. You don't take advantage of opportunities. You don't put yourself out there. You're afraid of embarrassment. You're afraid of failure. So you don't do anything. You don't push the comfort zone. You don't push the limits, and you stay in the realm of what feels good. But a long-term thinker fears regret more than they fear failure. So when I'm looking at a potential opportunity that if it goes south, it could cost me my reputation for a couple of years. It could cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could cost me a multitude of things. Do I fear failure? Of course. Like it's not like it doesn't exist. It's just that I fear regret more. Like if I fast forward to the end of my life and I'm 90 and there's nothing that I can do about the state of my health and the state of my life at that point, there's nothing that I can change. My life is mostly lived. And I look back on those decisions, I don't want to look back with regret, because at 90, it doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters, right? Like losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, who cares when you're 90? Like losing your reputation for a year before you build it back up, doing something different, doesn't matter when you're 90. All the people that you're afraid about, the opinions that they have of you, when you're 90, none of it matters. The only things that are going to matter are the people who are closest to you, who actually love you, and they're going to love you through all the failures anyway. So who gives a, you know?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you can cuss here if you want to.
You could.
Okay. Yeah, who gives a shit? You know, like you just, why are you basing your life decisions on that rather than the state of your mind at a later time in life where you can enjoy the things that you want to enjoy and live the life that you believe you were meant to live?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question that people can add to their repertoire when they're about to make some important decisions, right? Am I more scared of failing, or am I more scared of, eventually regretting not taking action? And like you said, right, I think when you pose that question, the fear of regret becomes bigger, right, at the end of the day.
Go ahead. Because not everything's worth pursuing. But when you ask yourself that question, you can figure it out pretty quickly. I think it comes from Tony Robbins. You have to double check me, but I think it comes from Tony Robbins. I heard it from somewhere. It's called the rocking chair test, but it's essentially that question. Imagine yourself, close your eyes. Imagine yourself sitting on a rocking chair on your front porch and you're 90 years old. Most of your life is lived. You can't really make many decisions that are going to change the trajectory of where you end up. You're pretty much tapped out at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this decision that I'm confronted with right now, am I going to regret doing it or not doing it when I'm in that position? And sometimes the answer is no. Like, I'm not going to regret not doing this. And that might not be a worthy pursuit. But if the answer is yes, then it's probably a pretty worthy pursuit and something that you should consider doing, even though the risk might be big and the failure might be the risk of failure might be, high. Starting a business, starting a podcast, like the risk of failure in all of these ventures is always extremely high. There's a very small percentage of shows, of podcasts, of businesses that actually end up being successful. You know what I mean? Like, they're all a high failure rate. So if you're gonna take the risk and do that, then it better be a worthy cause. It better be a worthy pursuit, or else, like, first obstacle comes up, you're just gonna quit.
Yeah,
take it all and go home.
Absolutely. And I feel that's a situation in many cases. People have this just extrinsic motivators, driving them to start certain things, and then when it comes down to the consistency, they just see themselves falling off. I'm pretty curious because 700 plus almost 800 episodes, you said, it's a lot of episodes, right? It's a lot of consistency. But I'm curious if the vision has changed from the very beginning. And the reason I'm asking this question is because when we started our podcast, right, we actually started it when everything shut down here in Florida because of COVID, and we had to pivot, right? We lost about 80% of our business, which was brick and mortar. And we're like, oh, we need to figure something out. We had a client that was doing pretty well with podcasting, and we were like, what if we model after him? What if we do the podcast 3 times a week and we'll see how it goes, right? So our main objective was, let's start the podcast. Let's try to drive some revenue through the audience, right? See if somebody listens to the podcast, connects with it, eventually turns into a client. Well, we figured out around episode between 20 and 30, I would say, we started discovering that anybody that we would invite to the podcast, they were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, this would be really cool. And we started discovering that there's opportunities in there, that you could connect with incredible people that you look up to, that maybe in any other situation, it would have been impossible to connect with, right? So this is actually even before I heard of you, if I'm being honest, right? And then when I heard about you, that you have your podcast, Build Your Network, I was like, dude, these guys talk about the concept that we now preach about. We now preach about having your own platform and using it to connect with those people that can either be your, dream customers, partnerships, or just add a lot of value to your network. So I'm curious, from your perspective, did you start episode 1 with that vision, or how has that vision changed throughout the 800 episodes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I started the show just as, frankly, because I didn't know what else to talk about. I was going to do something on sales, but when I looked at it, it was just a completely red ocean. There were so many sales podcasts already. And I thought, it's going to be more difficult to stand out if I'm competing against all these other people that are already really well known for sales.
Yep.
So what's another thing that I might attribute the small amount of success that I've seen at this point in my life? What would I attribute it to? And for me, it was always about getting around mentors. Like, when I looked at why I was good at sales, it was usually because I got around the best people in the organization. Whenever I would jump into a new, product or service to sell, I'd get around those people and learn directly from them what they were doing. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I didn't have to come up with anything crazy. I just had to learn from somebody who was already doing it that could show me the path that they took. And kind of hit me like, okay, well, why don't we talk about networking? That'd be cool. I need to build a network anyway. When I left that world that I grew up in, I didn't have a network genuinely. When I left that kind of bubble that I grew up in, I didn't follow me to the new thing that I was doing, because I wasn't doing the thing that they all wanted me to do. Right. So I was genuinely starting my network from scratch. And so it was let's talk about networking, and then, use this as a way to learn how to network better myself. And then what ironically ended up happening was that the podcast itself ended up becoming like the Trojan horse for me to get me in doors and in rooms with people that I never thought I would be able to have conversations with.
Yeah, absolutely. Did that strategy help you raise the $1.3 million for the software?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We didn't set up a bunch of podcast interviews specifically for raising capital. It was just that I had a network of people to draw on by the time that I sat down and came up with that decision. Like even just like the way that we structured the raise was because I was able to hop on a phone call with a guy who is a partner at a venture firm and sold his real estate company for like $3.5 billion. He has an MBA from Harvard, and he was a past guest of the show and was somebody that was always willing to help out when I needed some. So I was like, hey, can you jump on a quick chat? I have this idea, but I don't know if I need to raise money for it. And if I do need to raise money for it, I don't know even how to begin doing that. How do I start doing that? And so he talked me through for like 2 or 3 different phone calls. I had another friend that had raised like 25 million in venture capital for his software company that was acquired by this 9-figure real estate company. Jumped on a call with him, jumped on a call with another angel investor friend, like several people that were relationships that I had built directly from having a podcast or joining masterminds, which the masterminds I heard about from people that I had on the podcast. By that point, we just had a lot of relationships to draw on and people who had money or they had connections to people who had money that were looking for deals and wanting to invest in something.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that as the fruit of your years of consistency, right?
Totally.
And talking about fruits and trees, you got to nurture them so they can grow. And I'm extremely curious of what is that process for you, because I feel like that people that understand this concept, they can go ahead and start applying it. They start getting people inside of their platform. But then after they become guests on their show, they pretty much immediately move on to the next guest. And maybe they might forget about that relationship that it took them a while to get them on the podcast and to kickstart, right? So how do you go about nurturing people that have been in your podcast? How do you stay in contact with them? Do you even have a framework for that type of stuff, or is it just very natural to you?
Yeah, it's funny is I'm honestly not the greatest at this. I should have done a lot better from the beginning. I didn't have anything in place from the beginning, and then like a year and a half ago, I was like, man, this was a mistake. And so one thing we started doing is we've thrown a couple of these, and we intend on starting to throw them every quarter in 2023. And that's quarterly dinners for high-level clients, past guests of my show, anybody that's kind of in my network that I invite out to just a private dinner that all expenses are on me. I take on all the expenses. I invite out a bunch of great people, and you put a bunch of great people in a room. And in my experience, anytime I've ever put a bunch of great people in a room, it always something good ends up coming from it at some point. Yeah. Even if, it costs you $5-10 grand to put the dinner together, it's like, okay, but something's going to happen at some point. It's going to come back at some point, because when you put a bunch of great people in a room together, that's just what's bound to happen. Yeah. So that's one really practical thing that we're doing. And then from another sense, what I try to do is go through, I learned this from Jordan Harbinger, who's kind of more of an expert at following up with people with using systems. But I try to at least 2 or 3 times a week go through text message conversations. And so open up my text app, and I scroll all the way to the bottom, and I start scrolling up and finding people that I haven't talked to in a while. And when I find somebody that's like, oh, there's that person, forgot about them, I click into it. I'll send 5 to 10 messages to people that I haven't engaged with in a while, just to say hello, catch up, let them know what I'm up to, and see if there's anything I can do to help them. Yeah, that's huge. It kind of puts me back top of mind in some of the responses that you get sometimes are just like, wow, like this is an amazing message. Thank you so much for this. This is first class, So it's a good way to stay in contact with people. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
That's huge, right? I remember, we grew up in Venezuela, and our dad, we all owe to him, right? He's still there, and he listens to the show even though he doesn't understand any English. But he's like, I like the intros. But one of the things that he continues to we talk to him often, right? And continues to say, hey, have you called so and so? Hey, have you called so and so? And he's always on that mindset of, hey, have you reached out, right? And there's some days that you're extremely tired, and you're like, oh, why don't they reach out to me, And I remember I had this conversation last night. We have a brother that's in Colombia. We have a sister that's in Texas. That all our families kind of spread out. And I remember hey, have you talked to Mario, our brother? And, that came up. Well, Mario never kind of reached out to me. And at the end of the day, it's we don't have to be upset about that. It's what's our take? What are we actually giving? And to take that approach and be like, hey, let me just check on my text, right? Let me just check on my messenger. Who's somebody that, you know, we maybe had a great experience. Let's check in. And it's I think it's super important, right? And when you translate that into business, right? How do you obviously systematize that strategy, which I think is totally legit. It's super awesome. It's probably one of the best ones. And one example is like just yesterday, you know, we had this incredible conversation with somebody that we met back in August last year. And, you know, now we're going to be working on a couple of projects together. But back in August, you know, it was just a coffee shop conversation. And it will become an opportunity, right? Like if you give the time, if you nurture that. And it came out of something very similar to what you just mentioned. It came like a text, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to them in quite a bit, right? They have kids around the same age, my kid. So let me see how they're doing. And it was an opportunity that kind of opened up. So thank you for sharing those like very tactical moves, because I think a lot of people can go out and execute today, right? And hopefully get something
super simple. It's something super simple. Somebody said recently, like if you're in business, especially if you're in the expert business, consulting, coaching, or you have like a high ticket agency or service or something like that. He was like, people complicate getting clients. He's like, ultimately, at the end of the day, over a long period of time, what leads to clients is having great conversations with potential prospects, keeping in touch with them over a long period of time so that they know what it is that you offer, and then making it easy to do business with you whenever that need actually arises.
Absolutely.
So if you can create the initial connection and conversation, keep an open dialogue moving forward, and they actually know what it is that you do, then as soon as they have that need or somebody in their network has that need, then you're the person that's top of mind to solve that problem for them. And it'll result in business at some point down the road. The problem is people don't like to engage in activity that they can't directly track ROI. And especially if you come from, you know, like a direct response marketing world, they want to put in $1, get out $3. And if I do this webinar, I know my conversion rate will be X percent, and I'll make X amount of dollars, and we'll spend X amount of dollars to get people in there. I know what my profit will be X. And a lot of times the long-term value isn't going to come from those transactional type marketing relationships. A lot of them are going to come from people that you never even knew had the need, because they don't right now. But in 3 years, they do have the need, and they end up being your biggest client because they turned into not just a distant contact, but like an actual acquaintance or value add friend over the years. And then as soon as they have the need, you're the person that they're going to contact because you're the person that stayed in contact with them the whole time. It's the whole concept of digging your well before you're thirsty. You know, if you wait till you're about to die of thirst to start digging your well, then you're probably going to die before you get to the bottom and see any water. You know, you got to dig it long before you have the need. And it's the same thing in relationships. You just got to build relationships for the sake of building relationships and adding value and being nice and being a pleasant person to be around. And at some point, you're going to be thirsty and you're going to need something. You're going to have an ask. Like for me, it was the cap raise, right? It was raising the money. For a long time, I didn't really know what to ask people. So I just show up and add value as much as I could and try to keep contact with people. But then all of a sudden it was like, hey, I have this need and it's a pressing need and a big ask, but you know, I need some help with it.
Absolutely.
Can you help me? You know, but because if you dig the well, then you can draw the water out of it when you're thirsty.
Absolutely. Fonzie, I know that you have awesome questions, but here, like this analogy just came to my head. I can't remember if it was a movie, the 21, it was like a magician movie, but there's a
I thought you were about to say it was Magic Mike.
you wish,
like,
you wish. But I remember there was a magic trick in there that it's like this tree and they're trying to choose a card, right? And then they cut the tree and it's in a box inside of the tree, right? And obviously the trick is very impressive. But the big surprise is that trick was set up like
20 years ago.
20 years before that trick was actually doing. So the magician actually tracked that person, that it was like a little girl and where they put the thing in or whatever. And it was like, it took 20 years, right? But then you see the massive trick, right? So when you were talking about, you know, people don't like to do things they can't track ROI on, it's like we can, but it's just going to take a little bit more time, right? Because like for you, right, that conversation that you had, it was worth 1.3 million, right? And that initial thing, right? So it's like, what's perspective? And I remember a moment in our business side, you know, we do have an agency on the side. We have a backend service that we offer. I remember we questioned the show big time because of that same reason. And we had to slow down and, you know, we're like, let's look exactly like, where are the customers coming from? Every single one came from either they were a guest on the show, or they were a referral from somebody that came to the show, right? So we're like, this is the one single thing that's moving the business forward. But we have to be aware that we can sometimes maybe distance a little bit from that immediate ROI, right? At the end, it's like, trust the process, right? It will happen, and just take your attention and put it in those things. So I think it's super important. I think people have to believe, right, in the thing that they do.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to that concept of longevity and consistency that you were talking about before as well, right? Is that long-term thinking that you talked about. And that is a challenge nowadays. A lot of people have the quick win mentality. All they want is the shiny object syndrome. What is the next thing that is going to give me a quick result? And I don't know whether that is because of the needs, their own personal needs getting in the way of doing good business, building strong relationships, or why exactly it is. I'm not 100% sure. But how can somebody cultivate that long-term mindset? How can somebody, be consistent, get in that longevity game?
Yeah, man, people tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I think it's just kind of a thing that humans do, man. Like, I remember reading the story of the marshmallow test. Have you guys heard that? There's a book called The Marshmallow Test. But essentially the core idea of the story is that there was a study that was done, I don't know, 1960s. It was a while back.
Yeah.
And they sat a bunch of kids in a room, and they put a marshmallow in front of them and said, okay, we're going to leave. If we come back and the marshmallow's still here, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. But if you eat it when we leave, then you only get the 1.
Yeah.
And majority of the kids ate it before they came back. Mm-hmm. And so what they did is this study lasted through the duration of these kids' lives. And they followed all of the kids. And they noticed that every kid that was able to delay gratification for a reward later on ended up living a much more successful life in whatever path they decided to go down. Yep. And the whole premise of the book is basically like there's almost like there's a ton of different common traits that people can point to for really successful people, but the number one common denominator for any successful person over the long haul is that they have the ability to delay gratification. And so when I read that, to me, it was just like, I guess I mean, we all make decisions based on emotion, but when I read that and really understood that holistically, it was like, oh, well, that's just what I'm going to do then. I don't really have any tips on how to like adopt that mindset. Because for me, it was like, that's what I'm going to do.
It makes sense.
If that's what it takes, then that's what I'm going to do. And you follow people. Yeah, I think that it was kind of more exaggerated for me and potentially for you guys as well. Because when you have conversations with a ton of successful people, you find that to be true over a large test group of those people. That's why like these internet marketers who are like the people with the rented Lambos selling the courses, they don't have long-term success.
Yeah.
They don't, because they don't know how to delay gratification. They make $200,000 on a webinar or an event, and they go spend 175 of it on a Lamborghini to run their next ad campaign, and then it doesn't go well, and then their Lamborghini gets repossessed. And it's like, then you got to start from scratch again. It's like they're so focused on these short-term wins, they don't have the ability to delay gratification. And over the long term, you're not going to win.
Absolutely.
And the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is so that I can win long term, because I want control over what I do in my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to get a big win now, and then in 10 years from now, when I'm almost in my 40s, I don't want to be sitting there going like, oh, I got to start over, got to start from scratch, because I was thinking so short term earlier. It's like, yeah, I did well in my 30s, but then like I got to work in my 40s and my 50s and my 60s. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to set myself up for success in the long term. Otherwise, why am I here? It doesn't mean that I'm going to like never do anything fun. But does it mean that I still drive a Toyota Camry? Yes, it does. Because I would rather put some money in a real estate deal that actually like appreciates, makes me money, gives me tax advantages, instead of dumping it into a car. And not to say that I'll never drive a nice car, because I absolutely want to, but I'm just saying I have other goals in mind. And when you sit down, you listen to people, you have conversations with people like a Grant Cardone, who had $1 million in his bank account, and he was driving a used Camry at the time. And he went and bought like 2 apartment buildings with that $1 million, even though he had the money sitting in his account. He could have bought whatever car he wanted to. But now he buys jets and helicopters because he delayed gratification over a long period of time, and built his net worth up to the point where now he gets to do whatever he wants essentially for the rest of his life, even though he'll probably continue working because he's just addicted to the hustle. But but he has the ability, the freedom to do whatever he wants because he delayed gratification. I think that's a common denominator for mostly all successful people who have any sort of significant wealth or freedom.
Yeah, no, true. And you said you don't have any practical advice. And honestly, I think that is a very practical advice, which is surround yourself with people that already are delaying gratification. And you're probably going to, literally, like by osmosis, you're going to start, kind of like molding to their habits and to the things that they do. You've heard it. You are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So why not start a podcast and start bringing awesome people to your show, right? Start developing your network. Travis, we got like 4 minutes here. We got 2 more questions. You wanna take a shot at this one?
Maybe it's random questions.
No, we got we always make obviously the same last 2 questions.
Actually, I'm gonna change one because I think we talked about the action point just now, right? And I think it's like create that network, start creating that network. If it's from a podcast, I think it's very low friction to start it. That's why we actually did it, because we tried everything else and it didn't work. And this was the thing that kind of grabbed a ton of traction. But
speed dating doesn't work for networking, guys.
Yeah.
Don't try that one.
So instead of that, I really want to ask about, what has been probably the biggest challenge on turning the content into actual profit, right? Like how was that transition to you? What was that connection, right? For us is obviously the process of the show into the service, right? What was that connection for you when you first started?
I think the number one thing, if you're trying to turn content to profit, is training yourself to be a better listener, because a lot of people are trying to create their program. They're trying to build their offer. Instead of starting with their market and moving to their offer from their market, they just go directly to the offer. And then they try to force feed the offer down their market's throats. And when I started my podcast, the first ever thing that I did to monetize was I had a mastermind. And the reason I started a mastermind was that was the thing that people were asking me to do. So I jumped on free phone calls with anybody who was listening to my show for the first 6 months, free 15-minute phone calls. Probably jumped on over 100 just free 15-minute phone calls with people. And I would always ask them the question, when it comes to networking or building your network, what's the number one thing that you're struggling with? And I kept getting the answer about it's hard to find other people that are like me. It's hard to find other people that think like I do. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm going to build a mastermind that connects like-minded people together and makes them not feel alone in this journey. And when I launched it, we had people buy it because you didn't have to sell something that people asked you to buy or people asked you to create. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it's like your content is a way for you to be able to reach out to your market and learn from your market's mouth directly the struggles that they have, the problems that they have.
Absolutely.
And then you can build in products or services or offers or coaching or whatever to solve the problems that your audience or your guests or whoever you're interacting with and trying to solve problems for, that they're actually having, because you're hearing it from their mouth. And if you hear it from their mouth enough and you start to understand that problem holistically, then that's how you can really start bringing, people into your products and services. I think it was Dan Kennedy who said that if you can explain your ideal customer's problem to them better than they can explain it, then they'll automatically assume that you have the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's all it is a deep understanding of your market and content, putting out content and driving people to content can be a really great way to listen and understand and hear what they're saying and how you can help them more effectively.
By the way, you just shared a massive shortcut in business. I'm going to share a quick experience before we ask the last question, but we actually went through a whole day exercise where we brainstorm on the things, and this was probably a few months ago, but we listed a bunch of stuff that came our way, but we assumed that the product was going to be one thing. And I remember jumping on 20-minute calls also with people that have been coming into our community, and they were like, oh yeah, that's cool, but this is really what I need help with. But this is the thing that I need help with. And it was enlightening and it was awesome. And from those relationships, we were able to bounce back in a moment of a lot of need. So to your point, please, people, go ahead, jump on those 15 minutes calls and get that feedback. Super awesome.
Like Todd Brown said in Content is Profit once, be a student of the market.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's awesome. Okay, last question, Travis. Where will you be if you didn't publish?
I don't even know, dude. I mean, that's a good question. I really don't know. Basically, everything good in my life in terms of like my business and career has been a direct result of my podcast in some sense, whether it was a relationship or a connection to somebody else or somebody introducing me to somebody or an interview that I had or realization that I had, knowledge that I got, a book recommendation that changed my life. Like almost everything has been branched off of the podcast in some sense. So I have no idea. I'd probably be trying some sales job or something. I really don't know.
Still knocking on doors.
Maybe. Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Wow. That's very powerful. Thank you for sharing, man. Thank you. All right. Where can people find you, Travis? We want to hear all about it.
Yeah, probably just my website's the best spot, travischappell.com. That's CHAPPELL, travischappell.com. You can find Guestio, my software is over there. My social links are over there, emails over there, contacts over there. So travischappell.com is kind of like a hub where you can kind of get directed to everything else.
Absolutely. We're going to leave those links right below. You got to do scroll down and click on all of them.
Yep, that's right. Follow him, connect with him. Tell him the BIZBROS sent you.
Yeah. Travis, anything else you want to add before we head out?
No, that's it, guys. Really great conversation. Thanks so much for having me on. I know it's not, I don't take it lightly when people bring me on their show because I know that you can have a bunch of different people on. So I appreciate the time that you have.
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm just going to throw this out there. One day we're going to have to do a in-person one and it's just going to be absolutely epic.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Fonzie, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Just thank you so much, Travis. And we'll see you on the next one.
Sweet. With that said, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Content's Profit Podcast. Go ahead and follow this show in your favorite platform and at BIZBROS Go.
That is right. And if Travis here helped you move one step closer towards your goal, please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys.